It asks the question every serious student of the Bible eventually asks. If salvation was needed the moment Adam and Eve sinned, why did God wait 4,000 years to send his Son? This period of waiting is not a gap in the story. It is the canvas upon which God painted the need for the Savior. The world needed to be fully prepared, historically, culturally, and spiritually, before the Messiah could arrive with maximum impact. This long history was God's deliberate strategy to showcase his patience, his timing, and the depth of humanity's need. The delay was designed to leave no doubt that Jesus was the one true and necessary Redeemer. The time of waiting was, in fact, the time of perfect divine preparation. The primary reason for the delay was to conclusively demonstrate the universal failure of humanity to save itself. For thousands of years, God allowed humanity to try every path: tribalism, empire building, human sacrifice, and philosophy. The consistent result was escalating violence, moral corruption, and spiritual darkness. The waiting proved that all human systems, political, religious, and ethical, were fundamentally flawed and incapable of restoring the relationship with God. Humanity had exhausted all its options, creating a vacuum that only a divine solution could fill. The long history was an extended legal proof of the human need for grace. A critical phase of the waiting involved giving the law to Moses. The law was not intended to save people. It was intended to serve as a mirror, showing them their sin and their inability to perfectly obey God's standards. For centuries, the rituals, sacrifices, and commands of the Mosaic Law taught Israel that salvation lay outside their own efforts. The law prepared the spiritual ground by creating a profound sense of guilt and longing for a better final covenant. The waiting period was necessary to allow the law to do its work, to condemn sin and drive the faithful to seek the promised Redeemer. The long period of the Old Testament was necessary to create a detailed, undeniable prophetic blueprint for the Messiah. Over centuries, God used dozens of prophets: Isaiah, Micah, Daniel, and others to reveal specific, interlocking details about the Savior. These predictions covered his lineage, the place of his birth, the manner of his conception, the nature of his ministry, and the purpose of his death. The delay allowed these prophecies to be recorded, preserved, and disseminated, eliminating the possibility of Jesus being mistaken for a random religious figure. The accumulation of these specific details created the unshakable proof of his identity. The waiting was required to establish the precise royal lineage that the Messiah had to fulfill. The covenant with King David, centuries after Abraham, declared that the Messiah would come directly from David's royal line. The long history was necessary to track and maintain this genealogy, culminating in Joseph and Mary. By the time of the Nativity, the Davidic line was politically obscure but legally intact. The centuries were used to weave a history that proved the identity of the king, ensuring that no one could claim the throne without the proper descent. One major factor that made the time full was the spread of Greek language and culture, Hellenism, following the conquests of Alexander the Great. Greek became the lingua franca, the common trade language across the entire Mediterranean world. This linguistic unity was essential for the rapid spread of the gospel message. The fact that the New Testament could be written in one language and immediately understood from Spain to Syria was no accident. God waited for the entire known world to share a common tongue, facilitating the global transmission of the good news. The establishment of the Pax Romana, Roman peace, under Caesar Augustus provided the perfect political environment for the Savior's arrival. Roman rule brought stable, centralized government, standardized currency, and the famed Roman roads. These factors allowed missionaries to travel safely and efficiently across vast distances. The Roman Empire, in its height of power and order, inadvertently created the infrastructure necessary for the gospel to conquer the world, not with a sword, but with a message. God waited for the political map to be perfectly drawn. The waiting period allowed for the Old Testament scriptures to be translated into Greek, the Septuagint, which was read not only by Jews in the diaspora, but also by educated Gentiles. This made the prophecies of the Messiah accessible to non-Jews worldwide. More importantly, it solidified the biblical canon centuries before Jesus was born. This standardization ensured that when the New Testament writers claimed fulfillment, they were referring to an established, unchangeable text, not something written after the fact. The Jewish diaspora, the dispersion of Jewish people across the world, created established communities in every major city of the Roman Empire. These communities built synagogues, which became centers for worship, scriptural study, and crucially, havens for early Christian missionaries. When Paul began his ministry, he didn't have to start from scratch. He could walk into a synagogue, open the Old Testament, and prove Jesus was the Messiah. The waiting period spread the seed of Jewish theology globally. By the 1st century AD, the old pagan religions of Greece and Rome were in serious decline. Their gods were seen as morally corrupt, and their rituals were viewed with cynicism. The intellectual and spiritual elite were deeply dissatisfied, searching for a religion that offered genuine morality, an eternal hope, and a personal God. This spiritual hunger created a readiness for the gospel. God waited for the world to realize its own religious systems were bankrupt, setting the stage for the truth of the resurrection. The 400 years immediately preceding the Nativity, the intertestamental period, was a time of prophetic silence. God gave no new revelations after the prophet Malachi. This created an intense sense of anticipation and expectancy in Israel. The silence was meant to highlight the dramatic nature of the forerunner, John the Baptist, and subsequently, the Messiah himself. The breaking of the silence by the voice of the angel, Gabriel, was a profound signal that the time was finally full. The long, difficult history, including exile and oppression, forged a righteous remnant in Israel, people like Zechariah, Elizabeth, Simeon, Anna, and Mary. These were devout individuals who faithfully studied the prophecies, who were actively waiting for the comfort of Israel. Without this faithful core, the Messiah might have arrived to a nation entirely unprepared. God used the centuries of hardship to refine and preserve the individuals who would receive and nurture the Christ child. The overall delay demonstrates the principle of God's perfect timing, summarized by the Apostle Paul in Galatians 4:4. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son. The fullness of time means that every single historical, political, prophetic, and spiritual factor was perfectly aligned. The delay was proof that God's plan is not rushed or reactive, but divinely orchestrated and meticulously prepared down to the smallest detail. The existence of a vast, centralized Roman legal system was necessary for the documentation of Jesus' life. The census required for the birth, the records kept by local officials, and the Roman trial and execution all provided undeniable, external, legal verification of the gospel narrative. God needed a legal framework in place to confirm the historical reality of the incarnation and the atonement. The chaos of earlier empires would not have provided this robust documentation. The long wait unveiled crucial aspects of God's character, his patience, his long-suffering, and his faithfulness. For thousands of years, he remained committed to the original promise in Genesis 3:15, despite humanity's repeated betrayals. The delay was an extended demonstration of his grace, showing that he would not abandon his plan even after centuries of rebellion. This history makes the arrival of the Savior all the more profound. The Old Testament period established the system of sacrifice and ritual cleansing, preparing the people's minds for the concept of substitutionary atonement. The daily and yearly sacrifices constantly reminded the people that sin required a blood payment. This thousands-year-old ritual paved the way for them to grasp the once-and-for-all sacrifice of Christ. Without the history of the temple and its rituals, the meaning of the cross would have been entirely abstract. God chose a specific geopolitical focal point, for the birth and ministry. The region was constantly subjected to foreign powers: Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. This constant state of oppression and foreign rule kept the hope for a political Messiah alive, creating a constant tension that maximized the impact of Jesus' arrival. The waiting period kept the messianic hope burning fiercely against a backdrop of despair. The Old Testament prophets not only predicted the birth, but also the eventual suffering and rejection of the Messiah. The long history ensured that these difficult prophecies were on record, preparing the true remnant for a Savior who would be a humble servant, not a conquering general. The history tempered the popular, overly simplistic view of a military hero, ensuring the theological depth of the mission was preserved. The entire history from Genesis to Malachi is the necessary preface to the gospel. It provides the context for sin, the promise of redemption, the definition of holiness, and the failure of humanity. The 4,000 years of waiting were essential for building the theological foundation. Without this foundation, the Nativity is reduced to a charming story rather than the ultimate, inevitable, and climactic act of divine intervention. Why did God wait so long? He waited until the law had condemned, the prophets had spoken, the lineage had been secured, the language had been unified, the roads had been built, and the nations were spiritually hungry. He waited until the time was perfectly ripe, ensuring that his son's arrival would be undeniable, globally communicable, and perfectly timed to bring forth a global movement of faith. The entire history proves that the birth of Jesus was not an accident of time, but the climax of eternity.